This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. We've had our 24 hours to let this DTR injury sink in, and I wouldn't blame anybody for their first reaction to Deshaun Watson is out for the year to be one filled with devastation, because it's a devastating injury. It's an injury to your starting quarterback, and it sucks whenever it happens. If it happens, it's just never something that ever feels good to lose your quarterback for the rest of the season. And I don't blame people for going to a negative place or briefly dipping into some negative energy because of it, because it is such overwhelming news. So the first thing I want to say to Browns fans, like, there are some Browns fans who are like me, who tend to be on the more positive side of things. Remember to give people who might not be so naturally inclined to be positive some grace, right? Because this is tough news, and you can't just force somebody into positivity. You have to be gracious and patient with that whenever somebody feels like, their hopes just got dashed. So be kind to people. And just because I'm going to make an argument that is based on some optimism and a lot of numbers does not mean that this is how everybody needs to feel right now. What the purpose of this video is to put out there some simple guidelines so we can have some realistic expectations, some realistic markers to look at what needs to happen now that the situation is what it is. Like, it sucks, but that's the hand we're dealt. How do we win this hand with what we have in our deck? And two, what does that look like? Is that attainable? And is keeping this season fully on track with all the expectations that we had in mind anywhere close to reasonable? So that's what this little study of numbers is for today. So we can keep in mind the big picture. We can keep in mind the big statistical things that we need to keep in mind. We can keep in mind what's good, what's not, what can be improved, what has been improving, and what needs to get better or not better, right? Or can just maintain the same in order to reach a level of expectation. The first thing I want people to understand is that the Browns are a good football team. They're 6-3, and they've been 6-3 despite inconsistency at the quarterback position. Now, albeit, I think Deshaun Watson, in his 6 starts this year, he has been responsible for all but one win, right? I thought he made plays to win you that Cincinnati game. I thought he made plays to help win you the Arizona game. I thought he made plays to help you win the Tennessee game. I thought he made plays, and I think he's definitely the reason you win that Baltimore game. And that's important to note, right? What is also important to note is what the rest of the schedule looks like. And the rest of the schedule is not tough. I've went over that on numerous videos, but basically the Browns, if they win the next 8 games, they need to win 4 to make the playoffs. And I believe that all 8 of those games are winnable, even if you don't have your starting franchise quarterback, based on what we saw this defense do. Now we need to look at bigger expectations, right? If we feel like this team can still make the playoffs as long as quarterback's not a disaster, what does the defense need to look like? What does the offense need to look like in order to live up to that? So this is why I have these defensive targets, and I'll explain why I have these teams, these numbers, these indicators here in a minute. So basically, I'm looking at 3 teams, 2 teams that I feel like are on one edge of the spectrum for this Browns defense or an offense. and basically to create the range of possibilities in order for the Browns to become a legitimate Super Bowl contender, despite the fact that they don't have a great quarterback right now, or they don't have a lot of uncertainty at quarterback right now. The 2015 Broncos and the 2022 San Francisco 49ers. Now, the 49ers are on the upper edge of where you can hope to go in this kind of a situation. The Broncos are about the bare minimum of what you can get away with when it comes to offense, but they are the upper echelon of where you can go with defense. And then obviously the 49ers are a little bit on the lower end of what you would expect from this defense. I hope that all made sense. So this is the defensive targets we're starting with, right? Where does this Browns defense need to go? Are they at where they need to be at? Everything in between. So the 2015 the 2015 Broncos defense gave up 283 yards per game. The Browns are at 242, so they're good. And you see the 49ers, 300, they're good in both areas. So they're exceeding their range when it comes to that statistic. Passing yards, they're exceeding their range when it comes to that statistic. Rushing yards, they're a little bit above, but you're not too concerned with it because the total yards and passing yard numbers are so low. Points per game, they give up 18.9, a little bit higher than what you would love to have because it's closer to 19. But if you average up, it's basically the same as the Broncos, right? Both teams are giving up about 19 points a game, and it's mainly due to the turnover margin that both offenses that these teams have maintained as well. First downs, Browns are exceeding any range possible for them. Third down percentage, they're exceeding any range. 25.9. The Broncos were at 32.2 or 35.2. The San Francisco 49ers at 39. Just significantly lower. The turnover margin is interesting because the Broncos ended that year with -4 on turnover. The Browns are -4 on turnover right now. The 49ers are +13. The Browns are not getting to +13. The Browns have 15 takeaways right now. If you average that out to 17, it's about 28. The Broncos had 27 takeaways in the 2015 season. Right now, the Browns have 19 giveaways. And if you average that out to what it was, I think it's about 36 throughout the whole year. So they obviously need to cut down on the turnovers. And then the 49ers had 30 takeaways and 17 giveaways. So they were elite in that area. So that is the defensive targets. I think we can all agree that the defense is in that class, at the very least, if not exceeding that class in some ways. So that's very good news if you're a Browns fan, that the Browns are exceeding that class when it comes to that specific stuff with the defense. So right now that you qualify. If you're a Browns fan, if you're a Browns player or whatever, that your defense is so good that you now qualify for a offense that does not have to be elite in order to have elite expectations. You are now qualified for that conversation. Now, what does that look like? Okay, we're going to bring up the same two teams, except for the dynamic is different. The Broncos are now the lower end of what you would hope to accomplish, and the 49ers are the highest you can hope to accomplish. That is the ceiling for any kind of realistic expectation, right? That's literally Brock Purdy last year. So the 2015 Broncos, 355 total yards. The Browns are below that right now at 333. Passing yards, 248. Both of these, the Broncos were a real pass-heavy offense in 2015, but 248, Browns at 185, obviously below both of your targets. Rushing yards, 107. The Browns are exceeding both the 49ers and the Broncos at 147, so really good stuff there. Points per game, 23.8. The Browns have more points per game than the 2015 Broncos, but less than the 49ers, so you're well within range there if you're the Browns. First downs, the Browns have 177. That averages out to 334 over 17 games. That is way more than what the Broncos had in 2015, 314, and the 49ers, 347. So again, you're within the range of good enough in those areas. And then third down percentage, the Browns are 33.8. The 49ers were at 45 and the Broncos were at 35. So you're a little bit out the range when it comes to those numbers. Now we have different splits to look at when it comes to these numbers because there's more to kind of talk about when it comes to this aspect of this conversation. Now let's look at since the bye week for this 2023 Browns offense and see what really changes. If we look at the numbers for the Browns, they do go up, right? Since the bye week, they've been averaging more yards per game. So 346.8, 195.6 passing yards. So that's where you get the 10 plus yard improvement. You've actually averaged more rushing yards per game too since the bye week, which makes sense given that they've made improvements. But also keep in mind that this number right here, 151 rushing yards, it's a completely Nick Chubb-less stat. So that's very impressive there. 151.2, that's above both. That's out the range, actually, of both the Broncos and the 49ers is very encouraging. The points per game, 27.6 since the bye week. That's out the range of the Broncos and the 49ers is very encouraging. And in first downs, you're well within the range of where you want to be. So what does this mean? This means that you have a significant amount of hope for this season if you're the Browns, because I really don't think it's crazy, or at least the amount of offense that you need to get. I don't think it's crazy to think that DTR can accomplish this. If I had to come out here and say basically DTR needed to be Brock Purdy in order for the Browns to be successful, I would not be selling you this because that's unrealistic. But given how good this defense is, given how good the run game is, it is realistic to say that DTR needs to be just as good as Brock Osweiler was. And see, that's a little different. Or DTR needs to be just as good as Jacoby Brissett was. Because again, we look at these same numbers that we've been looking at, and we just add in 2022 Jacoby Brissett. With these offensive numbers, you're well within the range, right? 376 total yards per game. You exceed the range of what you would need in this scenario. 222.5 passing yards. You're slightly below the 49ers and the Broncos when it comes to total yards, but every other number, you're doing great, right? Rushing yards last year, you're about the same number that you are right now. The Browns are at 151. They were at 154. Obviously, Nick Chubb makes up a huge amount of difference there. The points per game, you're at 23. That puts you well within the range of expectation there. And then the first down, 250 first downs with Jacoby Brissett if you average it out per 8 games. And then that would multiply out to 386 over a full season. So again, you're exceeding the range. And in the turnover margin, because the Browns defense was so bad last year, they had a -7 turnover margin. But if you look at the give ups during that time, I think you had 15 that would average out to 21 over the end of the year, which is still not like a super low number, but it's well within the range of where you need to be. And in the takeaways, obviously, that's more about Joe Woods and that Browns defense. Now, why did I bring up Jacoby Brissett's numbers? Because I think Jacoby Brissett is a nice baseline or a nice line or a nice goal line to think that you can hit with a new quarterback in the Kevin Stefanski offense. Keep in mind that DTR playing is not the same as like PJ Walker. PJ Walker is somebody that they kind of just went with because they were available. DTR is somebody that the Browns like legitimately went out their way to get, went out their way to keep, went out their way to develop because they see things about him that they like a lot about their game. Now, if he's there yet, we'll find out. But I would liken the hopes for the Browns offense under DTR to be closer to what they got out of Jacoby Brissett than I would put to like a PJ Walker. I think they expect him to be better than a PJ Walker. Hopefully that's the case. If it's not, Browns are a little bit in trouble, but that's where the hopes are. That's where the targets are. So what are the actual hopes for DTR in this kind of situation for the Cleveland Browns? Well, again, let's bring up our three main examples, right? The Broncos in 2015 and last year, the San Francisco 49ers, because they're good allegories to kind of pull up. And I'm also going to pull some of Jacoby Brissett to kind of get to where I feel like DTR needs to get to, or for his goals in order to keep the Browns on track with their high expectations for the season. This is what I believe DTR needs to do. Now, we're going to look at Osweiler's numbers, and then we're going to also look at Purdy. And just know Purdy's the high end of this. Osweiler's the absolute floor of where you need to be. And then DTR is where you want him to be, right? If he hits these numbers, if he doesn't, I don't know. But this is the goal for him, or where the goal should be set for DTR. Brock Osweiler, 62% passing, 1,967 yards. You want DTR to be about 64% passing, 1,896 yards. I think that's reasonable, right? Brock Purdy had 1,744. I think he will have less than Osweiler because the Browns run the ball so much more than the Broncos did back then, similar to why Purdy's passing numbers weren't that super high. But I do think that Kevin does run the ball a little bit more than Kyle Shanahan. When it comes to total touchdowns for DTR, I have him at 13. That'll put him between 11 and 19. Brock Purdy had 19. Brock Osweiler had 11. I think the more crucial number is this turnovers, right? The total turnovers. This includes interceptions and fumbles. And remember, total touchdowns include rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns. So maybe DTR has 10 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. I do think that that's very possible in the next 8 games. Total turnovers. Brock Purdy had 4 total turnovers, which is interesting because his turnover-worthy play percentage was a little high, or was his turnover-worthy play number was a little high, but still only had 4 turnovers. Brock Osweiler had 7 total turnovers. If DTR can stay at 6, that would be good. I think he's probably, since he's a rookie, going to be on the higher end of that range, but as long as he's in this range between 7 and 4, I feel fine about it. Osweiler had a quarterback rating of 56.3. Brock Purdy had a pretty good quarterback rating of 107.3. I want DTR to be around 80. 80's all right. It's not great. It's about what Jacoby Brissett had last year. It's just enough. When it comes to sacks taken, Brock Purdy only took 11 in the regular season. Brock Osweiler took 23 sacks. Less than that, 18, you're in a good range there if you're DTR. Pressure to sack number, again, between 19 and 18. If he's at 18.8, a little bit on the higher end of that spectrum, I think that's fine because, again, he's probably gonna take a couple sacks because he's a rookie. The big time throws, right? Brock Purdy only had 3. Brock Osweiler had 7. I want DTR to be at 5. I do think he's going to have more turnover-worthy plays at 8. Again, Brock Purdy was at 7. Osweiler was at 10. I think there's going to be moments there for him to make some big throws, and I do think he's capable of making some big-time throws, especially if they're within range for him. He's not going to be Deshaun Watson, flick it 40 yards down the field, but he is going to be capable of making some really nice throws on the margins if you're DTR, and that's kind of where I hope that DTR lands. I don't think this is crazy. You know, let's look at it like this. If I told you he was going to have 10 touchdowns, maybe 5 interceptions to 6 interceptions, and maybe a fumble, and 3 rushing touchdowns, you wouldn't say that that's crazy. I don't think it's crazy. I think that if he hits those goals, the Browns can still reach any level of expectation that they had in front of them because they have a really, really good defense, a defense that is even outside of the range of expectation of 2 great defenses. So that's the level of defensive play that you have. And when you have that level of defensive play, you can get away with these kind of numbers at quarterback. But this is the range that I think the Browns need to look. At the end of the day, the Broncos won a Super Bowl with this level of quarterback. Brock Osweiler / old Peyton Manning, who wasn't much better than Brock. Honestly, he was actually worse. And you can argue that the 49ers, if Brock Purdy never gets that elbow injury, had a really good shot at the Super Bowl too. This is the range that you need to get to have those plus level expectations. Obviously, until we see for a couple of games that DTR is on track for that, that's not something we can get super excited about. But this is where the goal is. I wouldn't say this is where the bar is. This is where the goal is, right? The bar is, I don't know where the bar is for DTR because I have no reason or realm of expectation for him, given that I haven't seen much of him in the regular season this year. But I do have a goal for him, and this is the goal. And I'll put it up on screen again. The goal for DTR are these numbers in the middle. If he can hit those numbers, the Browns will be in a good place. They'll be a really good team, and the ceiling will be the roof for this team. If he can't, then he can't. And I don't really blame him for that. He's a 5th-round rookie. But if that's where he can get to, that's what they need, right? If they need lightning in a bottle to get hit, that's what they need, right? Brock Purdy numbers, I mean, that would be great. But if you can hit these numbers, your defense is so much better than San Francisco's last year that this right here in the middle will be enough to really have high expectations. But that's my takeaway of this. That's where I'm at. Let me know where you're at in the comment section below. Do you think that these goals for DTR are reasonable given the expectation, the situation that he's in? Or do you think that these are just a little bit too lofty for DTR? Let me know in the comment section down below. You guys have a great night. Have an even better day. Peace.